it was so mesmerizing and really beautiful. And you just really got that sense of that we are so small in like something that is so vast and so beautiful, but yet how special it is that we play a part in this really beautiful creation, and that we're, in a lot of ways, we're caretakers, but we're kind of guests too, and you really had this healthy respect for when you got underwater and you had about 8 like 15-foot tiger sharks swimming around you, and you're looking at them and you're like, man, if they really wanted to, they could mess me up.
Welcome to the Creative Community Podcast, presented by Destination Arete. I'm David.
And I'm Mark, and we're building a community of creatives who work together to achieve creative excellence. And today's guest is fine artist Joyful Enriquez.
Joyful is an amazing artist and oil painter, but more importantly, an incredible person. Without spoiling too much of this episode, but giving you a little taste, she's going to tell some great stories about whales, sharks, octopus mamas, octopi. I don't know, Mark. Octopus mamas, a mama octopus. Let's put it that way. Turtles, just on and on and on.
Yeah, she also shares the unique challenges and opportunities of painting what light does underwater, which is just to me, was a really fascinating part of the conversation.
Yeah, in the last half of this conversation, not only does she talk about her marine wildlife art and her opportunities there, but she puts on a masterclass basically of how to jumpstart your career as a fine artist by just telling us what she did that worked. And honestly, it is one of the most valuable chunks of audio that we have the privilege of sharing with people this year.
Mm-hmm. David, I 100% agree. So without further ado, here is our interview with fine artist Joyful Enriquez.
Yeah, so my name is Joyful Enriquez, and I'm a marine wildlife artist. I'm based in Washington. So I primarily work in oils and create scenes based on my experiences diving and snorkeling underwater. So bringing those experiences back to the studio and sharing those with people. Right now, I just finished up a project for the Stobart Foundation, which is an organization started by John Stobart, who's a very renowned maritime painter of ships and water. And they started this foundation to basically sponsor an artist to have an experience to allow them to create a series of pieces for a special show or an exhibit that they might not be able to do with their own resources. So I got a grant through them to get in the water with humpback whales and to create a series of pieces for a museum show. So right now, that's kind of what I've been working on. I dropped off a couple pieces to them for approval for the show, kind of the direction of what I wanted to go. So that's what I've been kind of working on now. And that project is really going to take about a little over a year to do. So I started it a couple months ago, and I'll be finishing that up next year. But whales have kind of been always something that have been near and dear to my heart. They're my favorite aquatic animal, but it's very difficult to get in the water with them. There's not that many places where it's actually legal to do so. And then the expense to do so is also very great. So this has kind of been an exciting opportunity to be able to do this, to see them in the wild underwater and get to paint them. So that's kind of what I'm working on. I'm really excited about it.
How are you so cool?
I'm not. It's all a facade.
That's like the coolest answer to what have you been working on recently we have ever gotten. No offense to our other guests.
No. Well, it's like I don't always have like cool stuff going on. So this is kind of like what I'll be and have been kind of dedicating most of my time to, which is great. I have a year or so to work on, a little bit more than a year to work on it. So, I don't, sometimes with gallery pieces and different stuff, you feel the pressure of the deadline. So it's nice to have a little bit more time to kind of make this collection of works what I really want it to be, and explore different techniques and how to paint these creatures and do them justice. So, yeah.
How often are you going to use just one time in the water with them, or?
Yeah, so the trip is 10 days long, and I'll only be going once. So it's a pretty extensive endeavor. There's only two places in the world you can get in the water with them, and one of them is in Tonga, and that's where I'm going to be going. And Tonga is an island above Australia. It's kind of it's like a whale nursery. Basically, when they're migrating, they come there for about 3 or 4 months, and the moms and the babies just hang out. They're kind of teaching them how to breathe and how to swim. So the babies are very curious, and the moms are not as protective. So it's a good experience to be in the water because they're just hanging out. The only other place you can get in the water with them is in the Dominica, but that's kind of where they go to mate. So it's a lot of like heat runs where you have all these like bull male whales kind of like charging through the water. And so it's kind of like a tumultuous kind of underwater experience, so not exactly, that relaxing or great for, necessarily photo taking. So, but yeah, so I'll be going out there. I'll fly out there and stay out on the island for about 10 days. And I'll be in the water every day, 8 hours a day, pretty much for six water days. And then, take photographs, do some sketches, maybe some plein air from the boat, do a lot of different things, and then bring all that kind of experience material back to the studio. Yeah.
Wow. I heard somewhere through the grapevine that you're scuba certified.
Yeah.
So that's okay. So I heard that right. So this upcoming trip might be the answer to this question, but up until this point in time, what is your most vivid scuba memory? And have you been able to turn that into a piece of art, or did you want to after you were done? That sort of thing.
Yeah. Well, when I first was getting going, I was interested in painting this type of subject matter. Um, the artists that I studied that really I felt like captured the underwater world authentically were people who were spending time in the water, observing it from life. And really, the most immersive way I could think to do that was to get scuba certified. So I did that my very first year when I was still a master's student. So I was diving as much as possible every month. I was in the water. When I was first getting started, with more experience, you can kind of do different things underwater. So I kind of had to grow in that. So I was just out kind of observing, kind of getting a feel for what the light is doing, what the color is doing, how animals move through the water. But I didn't really have any kind of equipment to bring any of those experiences back with me other than my visual memory. So over like about a 2 or 3 year time frame, I kind of saved up money, started doing research into underwater photography and the type of equipment that I would need. And then I would start going out and taking pictures as well. So I had something to bring back. And that was kind of that's a whole other art form on itself. And I'm not like the most amazing underwater photographer. But that was kind of vital in order to be able to capture those experiences and bring back to the studio. In the beginning, I wasn't necessarily painting strictly from my own photographs because I couldn't take any photographs. But then as I got more experienced and did that, then I was pretty much everything I was painting then became from my experiences in the water, the different animals that I was encountering. I think two of the most vivid, I would say, scuba dive experiences I've had was very early on. It was the first year I got certified, and I was actually out near Destin, Florida. There is a jetty area where you could dive, and I don't think it's there anymore with construction and stuff. But there was this little area, and it had all these types of like rocks and little corals and things. And I was down there, and I found like an octopus cave where the octopus had like laid eggs in there, and there was an octopus under there. And it was really cool because I was just down there and was watching her for maybe like 15-20 minutes, and she never moved. It was just like slowly she would kind of like move her legs just a little bit to aerate the eggs. And it was just really mesmerizing watching her kind of like take care of them. And as the water kind of like, I don't know what the right word is, flew or moved over the eggs, they just kind of like swayed back and forth, and the light was kind of sparkling on them. And it was really beautiful. And then I had to learn everything I could about octopus. And so then I like came back and started studying them. And what I found just blew my mind about the fact that when they lay their eggs, they will not move for 6 months. I mean, they stay at the mouth of the den, and they'll protect the eggs until the eggs hatch. And then pretty much the octopus, it will pass away because it hasn't moved, it hasn't eaten, basically starved to death to make sure that these eggs make it. So just the level of sacrifice in that and dedication that these mom octopus have for their, for their children was just incredible to me. And so I did a painting about that called The Sentinel, which was in my master show when I was in school, that was kind of like the first painting I did based upon like a very memorable dive experience and my own photographs. And then this past year, I would say the other like really awesome experience was I had the chance to go shark diving in the Bahamas at a place called Tiger Beach, and it was specifically to dive with tiger sharks. And ever since I was a little girl, I've loved sharks. They're one of my favorites. And it was one of those things, even before I got into art or anything, I was always checking out books about sharks, and I was trying to draw them. So this has kind of been something on my bucket list. I was like, man, I want to dive with like hammerheads and tiger sharks and great whites, and no great whites out there, but that'll be another trip. But yeah, I got to go out there and spend 14 days on a liveaboard, where we went out on a boat. There was no land in sight. We were just on the open ocean, 5 hours from the nearest land, just in the middle of nowhere for 14 days. And it was a magical experience every day to wake up and all you see is water all around you, and you see the sunset in their eyes, and the sharks, you could see like coral reefs underneath the water because it was so clear, maybe 100 feet down, and you could see everything on the bottom. It was so mesmerizing and really beautiful, and you just really got that sense of that we are so small in something that is so vast and so beautiful, but yet how special it is that we play a part in this really beautiful creation, and that we're, in a lot of ways, we're caretakers, but we're kind of guests too, and you really had this healthy respect for when you got underwater and you had about 8 like 15-foot tiger sharks swimming around you, and you're looking at them and you're like, man, if they really wanted to, they could mess me up, but they don't, and it was, it's one thing, working with conservation groups and studying undersea life and reading about how, sharks especially are demonized in the media and in movies and culture and stuff, but then actually being able to be in the water with what's considered the second most dangerous shark in the world, and to not be bothered by them at all. And I'm in there for hours with them every day. That was a whole new understanding. Like, yeah, these animals, they're not vicious. They're not interested in you as food. They're just living their best life, and hanging out. And we're guests. So, there's a certain way you act in the water with them, because they are such a big animal. But if anything, they were like curious little puppy dogs in the water. And they would like turn, and they would kind of see you, and then they would swim like right up to you. And that, you had to kind of like stand your ground and stay still. But I mean, they're just coming up to kind of figure out what you are. So they would come up and kind of like nuzzle around with their lips on your camera gear or whatever, which was so funny because they're so smart, right? So like tiger sharks, they have retracting teeth. So they basically can fold their teeth down inside of their gums. So when they come up to you and they're like kind of like grabbing onto your feeling around your camera gear, their teeth aren't out. So it's not an aggression. They know you're not food. They're not trying to attack you. They're literally just trying to figure out, what you're all about, and that really blew my mind. So this was back in April. So I have a bunch of painting ideas and a lot of source photos that I want to do. I haven't gotten to do a tiger shark painting yet, but that's kind of because this grant thing came up. But that's something that's definitely in the works. Yeah.
That's so cool. I was going to say, you answered both our first question and our second question, which is great. I wanted to maybe dive in a little bit deeper. We've used that term literally. We're going to dive a little deeper, but to talk about painting from your memory, because I'm a landscape painter, and in John Carlson's book, which is like the Bible of landscape painting, he talks in his last chapter about painting from memory, and he talks about how that's how you go from making paintings to making art. Is really because your memory exaggerates the important things and it de-emphasizes the unimportant things. So what is it to you in your underwater experiences? What gets emphasized to you when you're underwater, observing and capturing those memories versus what kind of fades away?
I would say the biggest thing for me as an artist and as a diver, the thing that I notice the most and love about being underwater is the refracting quality of the light. And what the light does underwater is so unique to that environment. And that's really what I look for. And I try to observe a lot and bring back with me into the studio. Because even if you have great camera equipment, as you know, with anything, it just is not as powerful as your human eye. So it doesn't pick up a lot of this stuff, where it simplifies a lot of what's happening with the light underwater. And a big part of that is you have this really cool relationship between light and water that's happening. So the water is filtering the light as it comes to the surface, and is kind of, basically the same thing as when you shine a light through a piece of glass, how the glass refracts the light and you get a rainbow. So the same thing's happening underwater. When you see all these kind of like shimmering light ray patterns, you're not seeing white light, you're seeing tons of just little rainbows everywhere. And that's something you just don't see in a camera. And it's just a really, really cool relationship with that. And then you also, it's not static, right? So the water's constantly moving. So you have these refractions and you have the rainbow, but then the water's also moving and it's creating current, and the current is affecting everything else. So everything is moving sometimes against the current. So you're kind of having to think about, okay, the light is being bounced all around. So it doesn't always necessarily have one directional, light source from one direction. So it's kind of all of those things you have to think about when you're painting from your visual memory, that a camera just doesn't pick up those subtleties of how the colors interacting, those rainbow effects, how everything's kind of moving with the current. Things just kind of feel very like it doesn't have a lot of movement in a photograph. And there's just, it is kind of confusing sometimes. It breaks, how light and color works underwater breaks a lot of rules for what you see on land. So there's a challenge in that too, so far as figuring out, okay, well, how do I try to simulate what I'm seeing in paint when what I observe most of the time above water, like light and color, doesn't behave anything like that. And that comes from experience and time spent in the water. So I want to take pictures all day, but 9 times out of 10, I might spend a couple hours out of water and I only might be photographing maybe 10 minutes, maybe 15 minutes. There's something about just having a camera. It's almost like it creates this barrier between you and the world in a little bit, where you're thinking so much about what's here that you're not really taking in all those different subtleties of what's happening So really making sure you just give yourself time to observe. And even textures, like there's so many textures underwater. The textures of the animals, the textures of the like the sand or the rocks or whatever it is. There's a lot of different textures, and how the light kind of reacts to those is very different too. So yeah, it's kind of all of that.
I really admire the way that you take all of that complexity and that difficulty and make it look effortless in your paintings. It's really admirable, and it shows a level of skill that is quite phenomenal. So that's really cool.
Yeah,
it's funny because I would say it's like every experience you have in the water is so different, and that every painting feels so different, even if it's, you know, I'm painting a turtle from a certain beach or whatever that I visited, and I might have painted that same turtle or animals in that same environment that I visit again. But literally every time you go under there, your experience is so different. Every painting feels like that. So there's never a point where it just feels easy or effortless, and I wish it did, because it would make life so much easier. But every time I get in front of a painting, there's a certain level of kind of, I don't know if trepidation is the right word, but almost like this conversation. Sometimes it feels like a nice conversation. Sometimes it feels like you're having an argument with your painting. Sometimes you're like, oh, why can't I just like capture what I'm actually remembering or seeing? And sometimes you feel limited by your experience or lack thereof, or by your tools, your colors, because you know what you're seeing and you know what you felt underwater, and trying to do it justice and feeling like it never quite like really captures what it's like. But that's why it's exciting, because then every time you're trying to get a little bit closer, you know, a little bit closer to that. But
yeah, there's easy, normal, hard, and Joyful was like, I would like to paint on legendary. I want to crank the hard. I want to crank the difficulty volume all the way up.
Right. Yeah.
I have one more question about scuba, and it might be redundant. So if you feel like you've already answered it, tell me. What I have read about scuba diving, it's not something you can do very casually, and you have to be very alert and aware. Do you think that being present when you are diving helps you remember things more? Or do you think there's like a mindfulness that you have to enter into? Like you said, that camera kind of takes you out of that mode. I don't know if you can speak into that at all, or if I'm just kind of, I don't know what I'm talking about.
Yeah, no. It's a really good point. So it's one of those things I think that is really special about scuba diving, is that yes, there's a certain level you have to be aware. There's a lot of things you have to think about, so far as controlling your gear and being safe in the water with the pressure and what depths you're at. There's a lot of technical things with diving, just so that you will be safe. And like your environment will be safe. But as you become more experienced and the more practice that you do, the less you're still aware, but the less you have to. Well, I mean, I guess it's like painting, there are certain things you learn, certain techniques, but then as you do it more often, you don't necessarily there's some things that start to feel like second nature, where you don't, okay, I have to put this much of this color and this much of this. And then, you start to do some of those things without thinking so hard about them. And it's kind of like that with diving. So the more often you do it, the less it's just second nature to check certain gauges or check certain things. And you have kind of a natural awareness of where you're at in the water, where the animals are at in the water. And you can kind of just relax and really enjoy your time. And one of the special things about diving and being underwater is that even though there's all this movement and all this light and there's all this energy, it is a very quiet place. It's very quiet, and you can't do anything fast. especially with diving. It's you're moving very slow, you're conserving your air and your energy. So everything is just kind of at a very relaxed pace. So there's a certain level, I would say, of mindfulness that is involved in that is very healing, mentally and emotionally and spiritually, where you're totally immersed in this other environment, and you're not thinking about how am I going to pay the mortgage, or what bills I have, or if you have kids, like what are the kids doing? Like you're not thinking about any of those kind of like weightier things of life. That all kinds of take a back seat, and it kind of forces you to be perfectly present in a way I don't think people really get to experience in other environments. Um, you know, Even to say, like, when you're diving, you're also physically weightless, too. So there's something about that when you reach this area that's called neutral buoyancy. When you get really good at diving, you can achieve neutral buoyancy pretty easily, and it's pretty much where the weights in your air, you're offsetting the pressure of the water, so you really are weightless, and it just feels like you're flying through the water. I mean, they say it's the closest thing you can experience to being in space. And actually, a lot of astronauts, they do train them for certain things through diving. So it is a very special thing to experience, and to learn how to do and to do all the time. And there's a lot of people who never get to experience that kind of almost healing, I don't know what the word is for it, but like this healing experience you get just from being weightless in so many ways and being present, and letting those kind of troubles take a back seat. And so in my art, it's even more than just trying to capture that underwater world authentically for how it looks, but it's also about how it feels and trying to share some of that experience with people, that I think is really important, to me as an artist. Um, Growing up, I dealt with a lot of anxiety and a lot of different, kind of like trauma things growing up. And I found not only with art, but just being in the water, it was very healing for me. So trying to share that with people is very important. And hopefully, that comes through the work. That's kind of what I kind of strive to do. It's kind of like awakening that things are wonderful. You start out as a kid, and you feel fearless. You haven't gone through anything. You're not thinking about how you're going to eat. You're just like, I'm going to go to the table at dinner time and my parents will feed me. You don't worry about too much stuff as you're a kid, and then you get older and you go through really hard things in life, or you might lose somebody, or there might be abuse, or there might be something else. And I think as we get into adulthood, we lose that kind of sense of wonder that there is things wonderful in the world and beautiful. They get crowded out by fear and trouble. And so creating paintings that kind of reawaken that wonder and give people a space to kind of let those anxieties and worries kind of take a back seat, I think is what's really special about art, and why I do it and why I paint underwater. Yeah.
Cool. I say cool, but I mean 1,000 other things that I don't want to try to add on to what you said, because that was perfect. So
I can talk about it forever because it's awesome. I love it. I just want everyone to be able to do it.
No, I understand. And I think I understand why it means so much to you. And okay, so our last question, I kind of wanted to explain it. And for our listeners, we kind of sent Joyful this prep idea of, recent grads who want to be fine artists or want to be professional artists. And especially in the fine art field, they maybe become illustrators, or they're graphic designers, or even teachers, just to make ends meet. And so for those of you listening that may not know this, all three of us went to a school at some point in our lives that has pretty rigid schedule as far as like when things happen, especially if you're a dorm student. And if you're not, you're a town student, then it's even more tricky as far as being involved in things off campus. if they're not necessarily something the school has established, then you're not getting a lot of support in that. So like getting scuba certified while getting your master's degree is pretty busy, you know? So what steps did you take, or when you were getting your master's degree, or even in your undergrad and then right after you graduated, what were there disciplines? Were there, were there practices? Was there, once again, I don't know why the word keeps coming back, mindfulness that you had to take to get you on that path to where you are now as someone who's getting a grant? And maybe Mark has a little bit more to.
No, I just wanted to say, like, and not that there's anything wrong with becoming an illustrator or graphic designer, but I think so many people have the intention of being a fine artist, and then it just kind of falls by the wayside or something, and maybe God calls them to something else, or they end up doing something else, which is great. But you're one of those people who is still on the path, so I'm just really curious to talk to you about that.
Yeah. So I guess I would start out by saying, on the road to being a fine artist, if you have to work another job to get going, I don't think people should feel bad about that. I did that for the first 3 years out of college. I worked other jobs besides, trying to get the fine art business going. And that, a lot of that has to do with, starting out as a fine artist. You want to give yourself enough time that you're not just trying to whip out projects just to whip them out for a certain time limit, but that you're really giving yourself time to develop a unique vision and unique style for your work that's truly your own and original. And that's a process. And a lot of, unless you're some kind of prodigy, that process doesn't really happen overnight. So sometimes working another job, it gives you that space and takes away some of the pressure for you to say, okay, like this is what I want to do, but I want to make sure as I'm going out into the world, trying to make a living doing this, if I want to work with galleries and museums and that kind of thing, that I am happy with kind of the way that my work looks, that it's consistent, so that, not that you don't grow or you don't try to learn new things, but that my whole body of work has a certain level of consistency to it. And so just giving yourself space and time to be able to put together a strong collection of pieces that all look consistent in quality and style, I think is really important. So starting out, one of the best pieces of advice I ever got, one was from actually Mr. Jekyll, whom I'm sure, Mark, and I don't know if you've ever got a chance to meet him, David, but one piece of advice he gave me was that getting going, even though I was still a student, is to see myself and to conduct myself as if I was already a professional. I think that was really big. And I think that means a lot of different things. I think is not selling yourself short, not going about coming off as being apologetic or as if you didn't have any confidence. It's not like you're arrogant, or saying, yeah, like I'm all that, I'm sliced bread, whatever. But it's kind of like saying, okay, yeah, I might not be the best person out there, but I can have confidence, and I'm going to portray myself as if I'm confident that that I'm called to do this, that I have something unique to say with my artwork, and that I can present myself as a confident professional, even though I might not be as far along as I would like to be. And I think that was really great advice, because if you don't have confidence or the ability to talk about your work, I don't think you'll get very far. Because a lot of times that's how people get to know you, get to know your personality and your work, and how you even get going in the fine art community. A lot of it, I think, is based on relationships. And good relationships take intention and take investment. And those don't happen overnight. So I would say beyond just, presenting yourself as a professional is that as you're growing, making that transition from a student into a fine artist, that you find people and connect with people and foster relationships in environments where they would connect with the type of work that you want to do, whether that is joining an art society, maybe that focuses on the type of work you do, like a landscape artist society or oil painters society, like the Oil Painters of America, or in my case, the American Society of Marine Artists, a society that focuses strictly on maritime and marine themed work, or trying to enter competitions, or even just attend shows maybe that are hosted by a gallery or a museum, or in a location maybe that would put you in connection with people who would connect with your work. Because I think a lot of it, like I said, it's about meeting people and fostering relationships. Art is so personal. It's personal to you as the artist, you making it, and it's personal to the person who's going to buy it. It's something about the color or the light or the story or how it moves them that will make them want to buy it. So it's building a fine art career is not just about the product, it's about you too as a person and the way that you're relating to people, and that you really care about people, that you're truly authentic. And so like for me, what I ended up doing, how I kind of like built a following or built a collector base so that I could start doing this full time, was exactly what I said. I started to do things that would put me in connection with building meaningful relationships related to specifically the type of art I wanted to do. So I knew I wanted to be a gallery artist. I knew I wanted to do marine life painting. And so off the bat, the first thing I did was I figured, okay, like how can I start making some money now? Because I gotta like pay bills and like do all the stuff. And I didn't really know that much about the art world, what that kind of environment was really like. All I had a foundation was my art classes, and there were no business classes or anything. So like, how can I learn how to do stuff in a practical way that I'm actually connecting with a real person? So I actually went out to Destin. There was a little gallery out there. It was not even a fine art gallery. It was kind of one of those galleries that had some fine art paintings, but they had jewelry and some craft things, kind of like a tourist gallery, but it was right on the water. It was down in Harbor Walk. And I walked in there and I went up to them and I said, hey, I'm an art student. I'm in my last year of the master's program, and I really want to learn a lot about just kind of the industry and selling and some different things that I didn't necessarily get a lot of training in. Would you be open to letting me do an internship? And they were like, yeah, no, we would like that. So I ended up for two days a week. I would go in after class in the evenings from about 5 to 7 or 5 to 8, just a few hours. And I pretty much just shadowed them and helped them out in the gallery for free. And I did that for 2 summers. And so I learned everything from from customer service, how to do inventory. They actually had a frame shop, so they were building frames, like cutting the wood. So I learned how to build frames. So I was like building frames and framing stuff up. And then they also had a big, like a giclée printer thing in the back. So people would buy prints. So I learned how to make giclées, and I learned how to price things, and how to do taxes. I pretty much whatever they needed to do, I kind of did. So I was involved in a lot of different aspects of the business. And then through doing that, they knew I was an artist. So they said, hey, like, what kind of stuff do you do? And I showed them. So they let me start like hanging some pieces for free, just in the, I had a small section of work in the gallery. And then when they would do art events, or they would do these fishing tournaments. And when I was first getting going, I wasn't just doing the marine life all the time, because I didn't have a collector base in that field yet. So I was pretty much just doing whatever art related to make a living. But I really wanted to focus on marine life. So I said, okay, who loves marine life and who has money to buy marine life, and where can I find those people? And the first kind of target market, I guess, if you want to use that term, is fishermen, because fishermen who enter these big competitions, just the boats they have to have are pretty expensive. And then to enter these competitions is not cheap. And the prize purses they win for some of these deep sea fishing competitions is very good. Like, I think like the Destin Grand Slam is like a $50,000 prize if you win, you know? So I'm like, okay, these are some people who they're on the water, they're familiar with the water, they're watermen, you know, and they have money, you know, and they're like really obsessed about their fish. This could be a good place for me to meet some people who would like marine themed artwork and could afford to buy it. So from being at this gallery down at Harbor Walk, this is also where they would weigh the fish in. So whenever they would have the fish tournaments, I would make sure that I was there, and I talked to them and said, hey, can I just like set up a little thing and paint, you know, outside the gallery during the event? So I would paint and stuff. And then when they would come up and hang up the fish to weigh them, I would run out there and say, hey, like, I'm a student, you know, and I'm like learning how to paint fish and do all this stuff. Would you let me just take some photographs of your fish? I'd love to, you know, sketch it or paint it for a school project. They said, yeah, that's no problem. And then I would get their contact information, like their email or their business card or whatever. And then I would take my pictures and I would do a sketch or a little painting. And then I would shoot them an email and said, hey, like, my name's Joyful, you know, it was so nice meeting you a couple weeks ago. Thanks for letting me photograph your fish. I just wanted to show you what I was working on, you know, what I ended up doing with it. And 9 times out of 10, they would say, is that for sale? I want that painting. And then I would sell it to them. And that's kind of how I first started making money. Before I did galleries or anything, that's kind of how I first started making money. And then a lot of times those people that they would stay in touch with me, and I started compiling a list then, an email list of all these people that I would meet. And then, you know, 9 times out of 10, I was like, hey, you're going to be in town for the fish tournament next year. You know, I really want to do this project. And sometimes through that, they would let me tag along on the boat so I could actually see them catching the fish. And then I would like jump in the water and take photos of the fish underwater. And so I started getting commissions for doing like prize catches instead of, you know, taxidermy, their prize fish. I would be on the boat taking photos of them and then take the photos back, and I would do an actual painting of their prize fish in the water while it was still alive. So I kind of built a collector base that way. And then doing that, you know, more often, you know, I you know, increased in skills and techniques and all that kind of stuff, and then started branching out into painting other things. As I was making money selling the sports fish, I was doing other kinds of artwork and putting together a collection of a variety of different type of marine life that I could present to galleries or competitions. So just, I tried to meet as many people as possible and joined some art societies like the ones I mentioned. Oil Painters of America was a big one. American Society of Marine Artists, the Society of Animal Artists. And then through those organizations, I got to network and meet a lot of other artists who I looked up to, who, you know, some who were my peers, but some people who were, you know, artistic heroes of mine. So being part of the society, I got to learn a lot and rub shoulders with them and just learned a lot from them, from being around and asking questions. And then going to, a lot of times these societies put on educational conferences where you can watch workshops or they'll give a business class. And that, you know, sometimes I got jobs that way where I would meet somebody and another artist liked my work. And maybe someone approached them for a job, but they didn't do that kind of thing. But they said, hey, I have this artist friend. She's going to give you a quality product. She's great, you know, honest and all this kind of stuff. And then they would refer me to somebody. So I got a lot of work that way as well. And that's why I say, I think it all, like fine artists, a lot of it comes back to, yeah, just building relationships with people, because it is so personal. And people want to know if they're going to spend this kind of money on a piece of artwork, that there's meaning behind it. And so a lot of times that has to do with you personally as artist and your story and who you are, as well as the work that you're creating. So sorry if that was a lot. I start like going down like tangents, but I would say that's kind of, being creative and being intentional. You can have all the dreams that you want, but if you don't actually, sit down and kind of put down some measurable goals. Okay, this is the dream, but what could I actually do now to work in that direction? And it doesn't have to be like this big leap in the direction. Okay, yeah, I want to like have this many galleries, and I want to do this museum show, and I want to do whatever. It feels overwhelming. Like, how am I ever going to do that? But if you can just do like each week, say, okay, I want to do 3 things this week, 3 small things. One thing that is going to help me now as an artist this week, either make my business more organized, or, or like help me practice my skills, or help me connect, reach out to somebody in my network and just, foster a relationship with them. Just one thing. It doesn't have to be a lot, just one thing. And then one thing that's going to help invest in something for the future. So that could be, okay, like I know next year there's this show I've always wanted to do, through this society, and I know it's going to be in a coastal area. So I know that would be a great place to get my work into, because it's going to connect with people who connect with marine art. So I'm going to make it my goal for next year to try to get into the show. So, this week I might, start a project where I'm only doing a little bit on it, but I'm working towards doing a special piece, maybe where I spend more time and care into it. To prepare for, a show in the future. So I think it's really like, and that piece of advice, one of my artist friends, his name's Russ Kramer. He's in the American Society of Marine Artists. He gave me that advice a few years ago. He said, do one thing each week, do one thing that helps you now, like you personally as an artist in your business for this week, and then do one thing that's going to invest in you and your business for the future, towards your goals. And if you're just consistent and intentional about doing that each week, your business will naturally grow. And so each year I try to make it a practice at the end of the year, usually around November. I actually have a time that I sit down with a journal, and I'll pray and I'll journal, and I'll be like, okay, God, I'll kind of look back over the year and say, okay, this is kind of like what happened or what I did, or, what I took away was the most important or meaningful things from that year for me and my business. And then I'll pray and look forward. Okay, God, like, what is it that you have for me as an artist and with my business next year? What is it that you want me to spend time investing in? And so I'll kind of, and usually it's easy just to have a small number. So I'll pick 3 things. Okay, like what are 3 things that you want me to focus on this year? And then I'll write that down and say, okay, like what is one thing I can do each week that will help me move towards that goal of doing that. And then I'll write those down, and I'll tack that up on a board in my studio. And at the beginning of the week, usually on Mondays, the first day of the week that I'm working, I'll look at that list, and I'll use that Monday to kind of work on that, and then the rest of the week I'll work on, just paintings for galleries, or, whatever, the nuts and bolts of like business stuff. But yeah, usually that first day is towards working towards those goals. But I think too, it's, if I could give anyone advice, especially starting out, just, to be patient with yourself. Cause again, I think at the end, people, especially now, they get so caught up in this Instagram life where everything seems to be happening so fast. And it's like, oh, this artist is doing that and this artist is doing this. Like, what am I doing? My work is crap. I'm doing nothing. Like, I should be having all these things happening. And it's not really like that in real life, you know, especially if you want to have a fine art career that really has longevity to it, that's not going to fizzle out, you know, in a couple years, is that it takes time, and that is okay. And that it's really about quality and not quantity. And sometimes things can look one way on the internet, or it can seem like a lot is happening for an artist, but a lot of times you don't see the 10 years of investment, you know, or longer that took to get to the point where now like some of these things are happening just because they've been cultivating relationships and grinding out hours, you know, and making sure their life is organized and, you know, all this stuff up until that point. So it's and you know, every artist journey is different. You know, I wish there was a rule book that said, you know, just do ABCD points 1, 2, 3, 4, you know, and you'll be able to make it as a fine artist. And the more artists I meet and the more people I talk to, you know, it's everybody's journey is different, because the people you meet and the gallery owners you meet, the museum workers you meet, like in the fine art community, the people that you meet and connect with your work and your story is so different from person to person. How your business develops and the impact that you have is so unique to a person. And that's why I don't think artists should compare themselves to other artists. That's really detrimental. Just foster what you've been given and foster what you have, and be intentional about connecting with people, and you know, stay organized, keep good records. I would say that's big too.
Yeah.
You know, get a system now. If you're not a professional already and you're just making a few pieces, that's totally fine. But make sure you're cataloging and documenting it well, that you have an inventory system, you have a consistent pricing method, you know, and those change as you go. But having some kind of structure to your business where it's easy to access, you know, your inventory and your pricing and your artist bio and artist statement. It's really important to have all those things kind of organized, so that when you do have an opportunity and someone's like, oh, we're interested, send us these things, you actually have the stuff to send them because you've done the preparation. Yeah.
This could be a Skillshare class, like just this hour. We could just post it on Skillshare and charge people for it.
That was amazing. Wow.
Oh man. Go ahead.
Well,
Mark.
yeah, I was gonna say, thank you so much, Joyful. This has just been incredible. Would you mind, I hate to move on from this. It's just been literally insane, but would you mind just telling people where they can find your work, and if they're interested in purchasing their work, you know, maybe where they can follow you guys, where they can follow you online?
Yeah, so I make it really easy. My website and all my social media, like Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, it's just Joyful Fine Art. If you Google that, you know, joyfulfineart.com, Joyful Fine Art, you know, on Instagram. So it's really easy. You can find me that way. If you go onto my website, there's a place that's called Work With Me. And if you go on that section, Work With Me, it shows you all the different locations you can find my work. I work with about 6 different galleries, a couple museums, some conservation groups, with easy links where you can click to go to their site and see exactly what they have available from them. Occasionally, I do sell work directly through my studio. The easiest way for that is, again, just to go to my website at joyfulfineart.com, go to the portfolio section. When you go through the artwork, you'll be able to see really quickly whether it's sold or available. Just hit the contact button and reach out to me, and I can let you know, pricing and where you can purchase it and that kind of thing.
Once again, we are just so grateful to Joyful for joining us on today's episode. I can't think of a better way to cap off our 2021 interviews than with this episode. So it's just such a great time having her on the podcast. I really do encourage you guys to follow her at Joyful Fine Art on Instagram, Facebook, YouTube. And then you can visit her website, joyfulfineart.com. And that is a great place to you can shop her portfolio. You can find out where she's in galleries near you. She's in galleries in Maryland, Charleston, Hawaii, all over. So you can find out those specific locations. Maybe there's one near you and you could go check out her work in person. If you do check out her work in person, take a picture and DM us, and we'll talk to you later about where you can DM us that picture, because we'd love to be able to pass that along to her and let her know that you found her through us. So that would just be awesome. But if you follow her on Instagram, you can stay up to date with her latest projects. You can find more about her art and her journey as she's kind of going on this adventure with the new killer whales.
Yeah, her website is really cool. Just go to joyfulfineart.com and get lost. It's really cool. So as always, you can subscribe to us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and YouTube for more episodes like this one. I was recently showing someone our podcast mark and they accidentally followed us on Apple Podcasts. And so I did not correct them. It was somehow they just were swiping and they was like followed. And I was like, hey, thanks. And then I just, a little subtle, like, okay, you followed us. Great. But you should follow us. You, the person listening, for more episodes like this one. Leave us a comment or an iTunes review with your favorite part of the show. That helps the algorithm know that you enjoyed us. And then feel free to send this interview with Joyful to a friend that you think would benefit from hearing what she had to say. Maybe a young fine artist who would, there's something that she said that would be the next step in their journey, and they would benefit from that. So please do that. We would really appreciate it.
Yeah. And when you've found Joyful's artwork and you've taken a picture of yourself next to one of her paintings, you can send that picture to us on Facebook and Instagram, Destination Arete, ARETE, but you can only do it after you've hit the follow button or the like button or the subscribe button, whatever that button is on that platform. And, but after you have sent us that picture, then you'll be following us. And then in your feed, you will see updates. You'll hear about future interviews like this one, as well as upcoming community activities. We post quotes from the episodes, and we always try to let you guys know when new episodes are coming out.
Yeah. And if you want to be the first to hear about upcoming projects, interviews, sneak peeks, all those things, go to destinationarte.com/contact or send us an email, destinationarte@gmail.com, to subscribe to our newsletter. We recently had a giveaway, and we used the newsletter to let you guys know about that. And we also had a giveaway on the newsletter, and I'm sure that will be coming soon. In fact, if you want to be on the newsletter, you're going to hear information about possibly purchasing items of varying value that would or might not contain the logo of your favorite podcast or your favorite brand. That might be something you'd see in that newsletter from Destination Arete. So thank you for doing that, and we look forward to connecting with you in that way. And we'll be back in 2 weeks with another episode, most likely Christmas themed, knowing us at this time of year. So we'll see you then.